Hi, welcome to my channel Cloud with Girish. In my previous videos, I explored various use cases for AWS Serverless Lambda functions ranging from a simple Hello World example to more complex scenarios involving API Gateway, DynamoDB, and integration with Amazon Bedrock for generative AI applications. If you would like to watch these videos, you can visit my channel or check the link provided in the description. In this video, I will demonstrate how to use AWS Lambda Layer and configure them for a Lambda function. We will start by using the AWS Management Console to create a Lambda layer and integrate it with a simple Lambda function. In upcoming videos, I will also show you how to work with Lambda layers using AWS SAM, an infrastructure as code framework for building, validating, and deploying Lambda function to the AWS Cloud. Let's look at the architecture. In this architecture diagram, you will see that there are two Lambda functions here, and if I have the Lambda function code plus the common function, both the code are together, and that means my deployment package size will be bigger. And then if I have a common function which is used by both the function, I need to embed that code in both the function when I'm deploying the Lambda function. If I'm using the layer, I can separate the common function into this layer, and then this layer can be referenced by each of the Lambda function that need to use that common function. And that's really one of the key benefits of using the layer. So your deployment size for the Lambda function is smaller, and then you have the reusability by separating out the common function in a layer. Prerequisite before you start on this workshop is familiarity with the AWS Management Console, a basic understanding of Lambda function, basic understanding of libraries and reusable component and functions, and a basic knowledge of Python programming. Let's get started. We're going to look at the introduction to Lambda layers, like what are the layers, what are the benefits of Lambda layer, what are the constraints of Lambda layers, and then few use cases for Lambda layer. Then we will do a hands-on, create a Lambda layer, use the Lambda layer in a function, deploy and validate the Lambda function. Once we're done with this, then I'll do the cleanup, which is deleting the Lambda function and the layer. So let's first review what a Lambda layer is. A Lambda layer is a way to share reusable code and libraries among multiple Lambda functions. It makes the size of Lambda function deployment smaller. Also, by packaging shared functions in a Lambda layer, you can simplify the deployment process and ensure consistency across functions. In order to create the layer, first step is to create a zip file that contains your sharing function code or supplement library. Once created and uploaded in the AWS using console or infrastructure as code, this layer then can be referenced by the Lambda function. Lambda layer offers several advantages, including reusability of code. For example, a common function can be shared across multiple Lambda functions. Simplified deployment. So by placing the common code in a layer, the deployment size of Lambda function is reduced. This also provides a central location for updating shared code. Inline function editing, if you are interested in that, basically updating the Lambda function through the Lambda console, through the management console. So with reduced deployment size due to layers, Lambda function can be edited inline in the AWS Management Console without exceeding size constraint. I think currently the size constraint is 3 MB. So if your Lambda code function deployment code is like bigger than 3 MB, then it basically need to be in a compressed form. That means you can do the inline function editing. And then library management. So frequently used library can be packaged in a layer, making them accessible to multiple functions. Now, when there are benefits, there are some constraints also. So keep the following constraint in mind, that a Lambda function can use up to 5 layers. And then each layer has a maximum size limit of 50 MB, like compressed. And the total size of the uncompressed function code and layer combined cannot exceed 250 MB. Another important point to note is that layers are immutable. So that means any update to a layer creates a new version, and functions must explicitly reference the updated version to incorporate the changes. Let's look at like few of the use cases of Lambda layers. So Lambda layers can be used in various scenarios. So some of the scenarios are shared library. Shared library can be packaged in layers. So an example will be that if you are using a Python as a programming language, Pandas is a very popular library, and you can include that library for use in a layer, and then it can be used by whatever other functions you have there as Lambda function. Custom function, that's another use case. So you can have a custom function, and that can be packaged in the layer and reused across multiple Lambda function. This is actually the scenario that we will be doing in the hands-on, right? And then there is a common configuration that you can be, include in a layer. Logging utility, you may have a class, you can that a logging utility that can be included in a layer, and then it can be used by multiple Lambda functions. So let's look at like our steps here. So the first, we will create a Lambda layer. So in this example, I will create a Lambda layer to include a reusable Python function that generates a greeting message. And this function, hello greeting, takes a name as input and returns a personalized message. If no name is provided, it defaults to a generic hello world message. Now, this is a classic use of like hello world simple message when you are starting an example of a function. So here is the function code, right? It's very simple. I have a function, hello greeting, is expecting a name parameter, and then I have a condition which is checking that, hey, if name is blank, then you simply return a hello word, and then I'm saying, hey, provide a name if you would like a personalized message, and basically then it returns that, right? So covering for the two possible scenarios, the function will be packaged into the Lambda layer. So the code that I was showing, we're gonna package it in a Lambda layer. So to create this function as layer, because I'm using the Lambda console, I'm gonna go to the AWS Management Console, navigate to the Lambda console, and from there click on create layer. Once I click on create layer, I need to provide the name of the layer here. I can provide a description, which is optional. And then either I can upload a compressed file in a zip format, or I can reference it from the S3. So I'm going to upload it from the local, and I have created a zip file which I'm going to upload it. And that file has the function that I was showing on the earlier screen. And then I can select a runtime, which in my case, I'm going to select Python 3.13 as the runtime. And once I do that, then I can create the layer. And then once layer is there, I will see it under the layer list here. So that's my layer. Now, since I have the layer created, I will now use this Lambda layer in a Lambda function. So to use the layer, what we need to do is, we have a function, so we need to import the required module and layer functionality. So I have like, this is my function which is going to use the layer. I'm importing the JSON. So that's one step. And then I'm also importing the hello greeting function from the layer, right? So this is my layer, hello world layer that I have created, and I'm importing hello greeting function. And then in the handler, I am getting the I'm actually, let me see. Yeah, so I'm passing the name in this function, the hello greeting, and then based on the message that I'm getting is that I'm returning that message in the JSON format. So that's really like the three steps that I'm doing. And then I need to attach this layer with the function as outlined in the screen. So basically in my Lambda function, I say, hey, add layer. And then when I go to the add layer, because I created the layer already, it should show up under my custom layer, or I can specify the ARN, right? So there are two different ways that I can reference this layer. Either I can just pick it from the drop down, because if I have like 1 layer or 5 layer, it should show up in the drop down and I can select it, or I can just pick the ARN for the layer that I created, and then I enter the ARN and I say, hey, add this. Now, one thing to remember is that each time you update the layer, a new version will be created, and you will need to update the reference if you want to use the updated layer. So in this case, I have the first, right? So you're seeing one, but let's say that if I made the change and I created a second, then I need to make sure that I'm referencing the right layer here. And once I have attached the layer, the next step is basically deploy and validate, which I will do it through the Lambda console. And then once I deployed and validate, then this is the output I'm expecting, right? So it's going to give me status code of 200 with the body hello Girish. And because I have passed that name as Girish. Now, if it's a different name, then of course I will expect a customized message. So that's really like coming from the code. So if I go back real quick to the code, this is a section that's giving me this message, that status code of 200, and the body is simply picking the message, and message is coming from the hello greeting function, which is in the layer, and I'm passing a parameter name here. So once we are done with this and we have successfully tested it, make sure that we do some cleanup. So cleanup should include deleting the Lambda function and layer. So that way, like, you just make sure that the resources, the cloud resources that we're not going to use, they are not just lying around. So that's just a good practice to remove those, especially when you are doing these kind of practice workshop. So if you created any new role during this process, so that need to be deleted too. I mean, it doesn't need to be deleted, but it's a good idea to just clean up the resources, right? So delete the function, delete the layer, delete the role if you created one. So in this workshop, I demonstrated how to configure a Lambda layer and integrate it with a Lambda function. We explored how Lambda Layer enables the reuse of code such as shared function, library, and how they can be referenced from one or more Lambda function. By adopting this approach, you can streamline your serverless applications, making them more maintainable and efficient. Now, in an upcoming video, I will dive into advanced topics such as using AWS SAM to manage Lambda Layer with infrastructure as code, offering a more automated and scalable solution. I hope you found this tutorial both helpful and informative. I am constantly working on new content covering various AWS topics, so please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the Cloud with Girish channel. Your support helps me continue creating valuable AWS tutorials and workshops. Stay tuned for more exciting content. Thank you.